Hello everybody. This is James McCray. This is my James McCray III. This is my presentation for research in kinesiology and presentation content. This is James McCray III, Cal Baptist University. Class is Kinesiology 473. And today's date and month is December of 2019. We're almost in 2020. Wow. Alright, so without further delay, I'm going to get started. I'm excited about this topic. I've done much research and investigation into this topic, so I will say I'm somewhat not a researcher as of yet, but somewhat qualified to speaking about this subject here. My topic discussion that I researched was, what are the effects of static stretching versus dynamic stretching for speed and athletic performance? Alright. From a former athlete myself, me training and who have trained athletes and have trained myself, who's been trained on the different effects of static and dynamic stretching, I can tell the difference between speed and performance in both. I have a source here from Sullivan, Murray, and Sainsbury, 2009 here. And they mentioned that warm-up and stretching are suggested to increase hamstring flexibility and reduce the risk of injury. The short-term effects of warm-up, static stretching, and dynamic stretching on hamstring flexibility in individuals with previous hamstring injury and uninjured controls here. So pretty much, pre-exercise routines, stretching warms the body up. Like static stretching is more to stretch out, to elongate the muscle. And you have dynamic stretching, it's more just to kind of get the body warmed up. And I have here a guy here, well, a picture here. Looks like he's, possibly static stretching here in this photo right here. And this is my introduction. This is a brief background of it right here. And that source right here is Sullivan, Murray, and Sainsbury, 2009. So why is this an issue? What's the big deal between static stretching, dynamic stretching? Like, what's the big deal? Why should I even be speaking right now? Why should you even listen? Well, I'm gonna tell you. As mentioned before, as a current athlete who recently experienced a minor right hamstring injury, so this is why I'm speaking on this, because I just recently experienced a right hamstring injury. I believe more research needs to be done and conducted as to what stretches will be effective for certain athletes. Many athletes, soccer players, baseball players, basketball players, football players, we think there's all like spandex. We're all the same type of athlete, the same type of body. It's not true. We all have different bodily, our mechanics are different, our shapes are different. Some are ectomorph, some are mesomorph, some are endomorph, different body structures. So what stretches will be effective for the different athletes in the different sports? Respective sports. Read this right here, starting here, this line. I sometimes prefer dynamic stretching before athletic performance over static stretching, because that warms my body up quicker. I don't have to spend so much time just kind of, stretching each limb. So dynamic's more of a shortcut to do. Don't recommend it all the time, but for me, it works. Each stretch has its benefit. However, based on my research on this topic, further research on this topic, either stretch is effective for speed, jumping higher, and flexibility. It just depends on what the body needs and feels at the moment. For example, I may wake up sometime and my body's real tight. I may feel like I need to do a static stretch to elongate my muscles that feel tight. Some mornings I wake up, I feel like I can run a 5K mile. I don't need to do a elongated stretch. You can do it, but for me, I know my body. I just do a warm-up, jog in place. I'm good to go. I actually jumping ahead here, I actually wrote that here, right here, so you can read it in your own spare time. Alright, problem statement. As mentioned before, the research question. What are the effects of pre-game dynamic versus static stretching on measures of athletic performance for speed? Here we are here. One of my favorite athletes here, Usain Bolt, one of the fastest men in the world, arguably. I believe another man from Jamaica beat his time or something like that. I'm not really sure, but He's still my favorite athlete. Down here I have the hypothesis of the research that I've done. The hypothesis, I have the dependent variable, distance equals speed, velocity times time. Times time. Independent variable, you have training type, dynamic and static stretching, obviously. And the test selection, obviously, an ANOVA test is done. 40-yard test is done. 10-yard, 60-yard sprint. You know, if you're looking at sprinting, we're looking at speed, so it won't be a marathon. It'll be just a 100-yard type sprint thing. So, methods. All right, for this particular study that I did further research on, participants in this study there were sprint athletes who were asked to complete either a static or a dynamic stretch. There were 10 males and 10 males, 10 females. They were actually recreational soccer players who recruited in the Las Vegas Community Center. And that source is Gasper, Santos, and these names like you actually can't pronounce. But they're all here for you to do further research on. The study was done to test out whether dynamic or static was effective in sprinting athletes. This is further research into, what I was discussing earlier. The procedure consisted of 5-minute walking, warm up on a treadmill at a preferred speed. This will be a dynamic stretch or a dynamic warm up. Baseline hip flexion torque measurements. This was either a static or dynamic stretch. Post-stretch torque measurements, 6 by 20 meter sprints with 2 minutes rest in between each. All right. Instrumentation, we have here these values were analyzed by 2 times, 3 time multiple stretch. Multiple comparisons were done on this research. So from there, and also the parity test as well was done on that as well. So, all right. And here's another one that I've done. I'm not going to read everything here. I'm just kind of going to browse through this line of information here. I'm actually going to start at the participants. So for this one particular one, this was a university campus. Qualifications for participants have a previously injured subjects with hamstring strain. So as I mentioned before, this was another study done on another group of people that had a hamstring injury, but not within the last month, but within the last year, to see if that injury was still subsiding or still, if they were still affected by the injury. All right. And for the procedures, participants were randomly allocated of stretching days, baseline flexibility, passive knee, extension range of motion. We call that PKE, ROM, range of motion. And the statistical analyst was one-way measures. ANOVA was used to analyze the differences with respect to time, group, times group interactions. And the conclusion of that was there was no significant difference between results for the right and left legs of the control groups. They tested out both legs, the injured leg and the uninjured leg. And I have the source here for we'll do further research on that. I actually recommend you do further research on that. That was pretty interesting. All right, so for the discussion part, the findings of this study was relatively small. This wasn't really a big study, but nevertheless, they still, studied. They still studied this for the athletes. It actually increased hamstring flexibility. Static stretching was significantly increased. Hamstring flexibility due to the elongation of the muscles, as I mentioned before. Static stretching is used for the elongation of the muscle. Dynamic's not really a stretch, it just gets the body loose. So that's the main difference. The short-term effects of warm-up and static stretching on hamstring flexibility was greater in those with reduced flexibility post-injury. But the difference wasn't significant. Again, that's Sullivan, Murray, and Sainsbury. I believe future research needs to be conducted. Like I said, active aerobic warm-up significantly increased hamstring flexibility on this. All right. And this is more discussion on the previous article or the previous journal article that I've discussed earlier. This is further research, more findings on it. I'm actually going to go down to, because it says the same thing, so it's going to go down to the further research and conclusion part of it. For this one, it was a lack of statistical significance by several factors. It was a small study, as I mentioned before. Future research, they concluded that future research needs to be done or conducted, matching the participant experience and playing level. As I mentioned before I've even done this research, I knew that, everybody's body mechanics are different, and every athlete is different. Some people body types are a little more smaller, skinnier, leaner, some a little more, medium size, like myself. Others are a little more large. All right, so a little over the time, but here's my research, my references that I've used. 3 references. I had much more, but due to the interest of time and slides, I had to condense it down. So there's 3 sources right here. This is Sullivan, Murray, and Sainsbury, 2009. Bartel, Christine, changes in sprint kinetics or kinematics following static or dynamic stretching. I have Gasper, Santos, and these names I can't pronounce. Acute effects of differential learning in football kicking performance and in counter movement jump. All right. If you have any questions, email me, or here's my references. So if you have any more questions, you can look up the research right here that I have here for further analysis. Again, thank you for listening. Bye.